Tears of the Kingdom's awesome, and pretty much everyone's happy, but just like I predicted in my video about Fickle Zelda fans, there's a good portion of the community who are starting to turn on the do whatever you want, whenever you want format of Zelda games in favor of the classic linearity. And while I may be a happy full-grown man regardless of what kind of Zelda game Nintendo gives us, I think they're in a position where there's literally only one way to win the entire Zelda fanbase over going forward, and that's to simply give the people what they want. Which people, you ask? Well, stay tuned and find out right now. Well, everybody, but please don't click on that Alex Jones AI compilation and stay on this video. I'll tell you more about it. Please. Okay, so sure, there might not be that many people who are frustrated with non-linear Zelda right now, but it's about as many people who said that Twilight Princess was too linear after that game came out. Much like right now with Tears of the Kingdom, nobody seemed to take those claims seriously at the time. And then like a year after Skyward Sword came out, that small group of like 20 people spread their resentment for linearity like a virus until we had a straight-up mob demanding that Zelda return to its non-linear roots, but in 3D. What basically happened was the non-linear vocal minority shamed Twilight Princess fans for celebrating what they saw as a bastardization of a franchise that they felt like was supposed to be about freedom and exploration. But meanwhile, the TP fans were a bit skeptical and dismissive of this. Then a few years later, after the initial hype from Skyward Sword wore off, they were all just kind of like, okay, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying here. Then out of nowhere, boom, Nintendo was pubic enemy number 1. You idiot, you were supposed to say public! It says pubic. Well, just say it, say public! Pubic's funnier. I know. Look, Skyward Sword definitely had its fair share of problems even back then, but I always felt like it was unfair to expect Nintendo to have had any way of knowing that fans were sick of linearity after we'd all been eating it up for like 15 years at that point. And it's not even like the above-average sized den was completely clueless or anything like that either, since the game did let you choose the order of some of the dungeons. I mean, they probably didn't hear the rumblings that fans were getting sick of linearity until like halfway through the game's development, so I kinda feel like we gotta cut Nintendo a little bit of slack here. My point, though, is that there were only a few people complaining about linearity when Twilight Princess was fresh and hot, but by the time the next game came out, a lot more people shared the same feelings, almost as if everybody was thinking it deep down all along, which brings us to Tears of the Kingdom. I love this game a lot, I think most of us do too, but even if you think the non-linear format's 1,000 times better, I think we could all agree that both styles are very different from each other. The linear style, which I'm gonna call Classic Zelda, may not give you as much freedom, but there's still tons to explore, and the structure's way better for keeping the puzzles fresh from beginning to end, plus it's much better for telling one main story, in my opinion. That's not to say that the non-linear games, which I'll call open-world Zelda, don't have puzzles or story, but with only a handful of items, the puzzles really only offer so much variety, and like, if you have the option to go right to the end of the game, then technically that kinda makes all the stories surrounding the dungeons optional self-contained side stories, even if they are enjoyable. Obviously, open-world Zelda has its own strengths too, with its exploration and massiveness, hence why it's way more popular currently, but since both styles are different, that means that if Nintendo commits to one going forward while abandoning the other one forever, then there's always going to be a portion of the fanbase who are unhappy. At the time of this recording, the Prime Minister of Zelda, Eiji Aonuma, pretty much said that they're sticking with the open-world style going forward, which, if you had to pick one, seems like a safe bet considering how well Batua and Takta had done and are still doing, but if you ignore the seemingly small group of fans craving classic Zelda now, then you run the risk of this group growing in numbers and rejecting the third open-world 3D Zelda game no matter what, almost certainly unfairly so, too. But on the flip side, I'd say that way more people prefer the open world Zelda at this moment, so if the next game goes back to the classic format, then a lot of people would probably see it as a step back. Besides, Zelda fans have proven that they shouldn't be listened to with a history of fickleness so big that I was able to make a 30-minute video out of, so why should Nintendo give in to the demands of terrorists now? I mean, it's not like the sequel to Tears of the Kingdom is gonna pull a Skyward Sword and force a bunch of weird gimmicky stuff onto us, so why fix what isn't broken? Well, because whether it be the Tears of the Kingdom sequel, the game after that, or 2 games after that, fans will inevitably get tired of the same thing over and over again, even if each game has its own unique twist going forward. You know, kinda like how open world 3D Zelda was created in the first place, so if you ask me, the best way to keep Zelda fresh is to never lock it down into one thing it has to be forever and ever until the end of time. And to do that, I think Nintendo really ought to consider rotating the kinds of Zelda games we get going forward. Obviously, if you announce an open-world game next or vice versa, somebody's gonna be disappointed, but not if you make it clear that whatever format's coming next will be followed up by the other one down the road, even if it's not right away. This way, people who love the current formula won't just outright reject the return to the roots out of protest, and the same thing goes for the next open-world game, too. It's like once we finally got Twilight Princess, everyone who was a baby about Wind Waker and Majora's Mask were able to finally go back and give those games a fair shake retroactively, and this right here is the power of giving everybody what they want. And hey, why stop there? In addition to classic and open world 3D games, why not also keep 2D Zelda games coming? And I'm not talking about remasters or anything like that either. I'm talking about original 2D Zelda games made from scratch. And you know what? Why not even a Majora's Mask time loop successor, or even some other weird twist the franchise no one's ever thought of yet? The possibilities are endless when nobody believes that their favorite games are permanently replaced for all of eternity, and obviously you'll never be able to make everybody happy all the time, but this is probably about as close as it gets. Not only would all the fans be really happy, but Nintendo would be making a lot of money from this too, which according to rumors makes them rock hard. Like, sure, making more Zelda games would take more people, but come on, this is Zelda we're talking about here. I think it'd be worth it to hire more people to keep everybody happy, especially if the money made from it would exceed the money spent. I'm absolutely not saying that they should release a new Zelda game every year by any means, though, even though we've kind of been getting a new Zelda game every year as it is. I think it goes without saying that they should take as much time to develop these games as they need. Just don't give third parties the keys to the Ferrari unless they can absolutely be trusted like Capcom was with those few Zelda games that they made. And of course you gotta let Eiji Onuma oversee everything, but I don't think he needs to straight up do everything. There's plenty of talented and hungry young developers out there, even just within Nintendo, who I'm sure would love to have the chance to innovate a Zelda game. But notice the key word, innovate. Just because you make another classic 3D Zelda game or another 2D game does not mean that there needs to be some kind of an uninspired greatest hits adventure filled to the brim with ideas that we've already seen before. As great as all the classic Zelda games are, they all barely scratch the surface as to what you can do with a linear formula, and the same goes for the 2D games even. I mean, just look at A Link Between Worlds for the 3DS. Everybody thought that 2D Zelda had a ceiling given how simplistic it was, and yet that game ended up being beloved by all. In fact, it's honest to God my favorite game in the entire franchise, regardless of how many dimensions we're talking about. And if the last classic 3D Zelda game was all the way back in 2011, then just imagine how much potential there is for a new game all these years later. Surely you can merge some of the elements from the open world games, just like how the open world games even exist in the first place because of every Zelda game that came before them. And hey, maybe if there were more than one Zelda crew working on different kinds of games, then maybe they'd be motivated to outdo each other. It's not like a classic 3D game doesn't have a chance to top an open world game, and it's not like the classic Zelda games that have to be like lesser than 20-hour games or anything like that either. You can still make them feel epic and massive. Hell, with enough time and effort, you can even make the 2D games feel more epic than ever, or, you know, at the very least not have Link's Awakening be the final 2D Zelda game in history. Again, I'm not saying you gotta milk Zelda and just pump new games out left and right. Zelda releases should always feel special, bottom line, but if we're already getting games like Hyrule Warriors, Cadence of Hyrule, and remasters, then why not instead fill these gaps in with real Zelda games that all still feel fresh, offer something unique, and innovate the franchise in multiple directions? Anyway, that's all for today, but if you got a kick out of my incoherent rambling and disturbing imagery, though, then you should check out my video on the history of Fickle Zelda fans. But if you'll excuse me, though, I gotta go shovel the walk before my dad gets the belt out again. Full disclaimer, child abuse is never funny, but I am a full-grown man, so, I mean, it's kind of funny when my dad whoops my ass.